The conference room felt sterile and cold. Trent sat across from me chewing gum like always, his expression dismissive. HR sat silently in the corner taking notes. "Look, Cassidy, I'm going to be honest with you. You're just not leadership material." The words landed like a punch. I'd been expecting this promotion for months after running 3 major projects solo. My hand clenched under the table, nails digging into my palm. "People tolerate you, they don't follow you," he continued casually, like he was discussing the weather. I forced a tight smile, nodding like I understood. But in my head, one thought burned clearly. I'm going to make you completely irrelevant. I had no idea how yet, but I knew I would. This rejection would be the biggest mistake of his career. I walked to the parking garage in a daze, blinking back tears I refused to let fall. 3 years. 3 years of working twice as hard as everyone else. 3 years of mentoring juniors and fixing Trent's mistakes. And this was my reward? Being told I wasn't leadership material? My phone buzzed with a text from my best friend asking how it went. I couldn't respond yet. I just sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel, whispering to myself, "After 3 years, he said I'm not leadership material?" But something hardened inside me in that moment, something cold and determined. I didn't know it yet, but within a year, everything would change. Within a year, Trent would be reporting directly to my department, and I would be the one deciding his future. My name is Cassidy Torres, and I'm 33 years old. I work as a senior analyst at a mid-sized tech company. For 3 years, I'd been running major projects, mentoring junior team members, and quietly cleaning up after Trent's constant mistakes. Everyone on the floor came to me with questions, not him. I stayed late reviewing proposals he'd approved without reading. I mediated conflicts he'd created through poor communication. Anyone watching objectively could see I was already leading. I just didn't have the title or the paycheck to match. My internal monologue had always been the same: work harder, prove yourself, and they'll notice. But I'd been naive. I didn't realize the rules were rigged. Merit didn't matter when favoritism controlled everything. That realization changed everything about my strategy. A quiet coworker named Marcus pulled me aside 2 days later. "I probably shouldn't tell you this," he said nervously, but Trent had already promised the promotion to Evan before the review cycle even started. Evan? Loud, incompetent Evan who interrupted me in every meeting and took credit for team wins. "They've been friends since college," Marcus continued. "It was never about your performance. He just needed to go through the motions." I thanked Marcus and walked away calmly, but inside I was raging. The promotion had never been available to me. The review process had been a performance. Trent had lied to my face for months, letting me work extra hours and weekends for something he'd never intended to give me. It wasn't about merit. It never had been. And that meant I'd been playing the wrong game entirely. I requested my HR file a week later, citing a routine review. What I found made my stomach turn. A peer feedback summary I'd never seen before. Anonymous comments claiming I was abrasive, cold, and too reserved to lead effectively. None of these matched the actual feedback I'd received directly from colleagues. The document was dated exactly 2 weeks before promotion decisions. Convenient timing. I read through it 3 times, recognizing Trent's phrasing in several comments. He'd fabricated this document to justify denying my promotion. It was all there in writing. Lies documented as official feedback. I made copies immediately. 3 different cloud storage accounts. I wasn't sure yet what I'd do with this evidence, but I knew documentation would be crucial. He'd lied on paper, so I'd let the paper tell the truth. I didn't explode or confront anyone. I just started building my case quietly. Every email I sent, I BCC'd to my personal account. Every project I led, I documented my contributions with timestamps. Every task ownership, I tracked in a private spreadsheet. When Trent took credit for my work in meetings, I smiled and said nothing, but I noted the date, who was present, and what was said. I was creating an undeniable record of my actual contributions versus his claims. Not for a legal case, for internal leverage. For the moment when the right person would finally ask the right questions. I was patient, methodical, cold. Trent thought I'd been defeated. He had no idea I was just getting started. Revenge served cold is far more effective than hot anger. Trent skipped a major executive meeting 3 weeks later. Again, it was his pattern: avoid accountability, take credit for success. The VP of operations looked annoyed when Trent didn't show. "Where's your team lead?" she asked. "I can present in his absence," I offered calmly. I walked them through the quarterly project flawlessly. Clear metrics, strategic recommendations, risk analysis. When I finished, the VP leaned back in her chair. "This is excellent work. Why isn't she leading this team?" She directed the question to Trent's boss, who looked uncomfortable. The seed was planted. People were starting to notice the gap between Trent's title and my actual work. I walked out of that meeting with my head high. The power shift had begun, slowly, quietly, but undeniably. I'd been mentoring a young intern named Brooke for months, teaching her data analysis, presentation skills, and office politics navigation. She was bright and eager, soaking up everything I shared. When she got fast-tracked to a junior analyst position, she was grateful. "You changed my career trajectory," she told me earnestly. I'd smiled and congratulated her. I didn't know that Brooke had secretly nominated me for an internal leadership development program, a cohort for high-potential employees being groomed for management. When HR reached out inviting me to apply, I was surprised. "Brooke submitted a very compelling recommendation," they explained. "We'd like you to consider joining the next cohort." I accepted immediately. Trent didn't even know this program existed. I was being developed for leadership while he thought I'd given up. Office dynamics started shifting noticeably. Colleagues began coming to me directly instead of going through Trent. They trusted my judgment more than his. I noticed it in small ways. Marcus asking me to review his proposal before submitting it. Brooke checking strategic decisions with me. Even Evan, Trent's friend, asking for my input on a client presentation. Whispers spread through the floor. Cassidy basically runs things anyway. Trent just has the title. She's the real leader here. I never encouraged these conversations. I just continued doing excellent work consistently, building trust, solving problems, being reliable. The kind of leadership that doesn't require announcements or demands. The kind that emerges naturally when competence meets consistency. Trent was becoming irrelevant without even realizing it. His title meant less every day. Trent made his first major mistake during an executive review. He presented my recent efficiency report as his own work, smiled through the presentation, took congratulations afterward. But I'd embedded a data signature in the model. My initials coded into the calculation formulas, not visible unless you knew where to look. The VP of operations knew where to look. She'd been in data analytics for 20 years. After the meeting, she pulled me aside. "That was your work, wasn't it?" I didn't throw Trent under the bus. I just said quietly, "I'm happy to clarify any methodology questions if needed." She nodded, understanding everything I didn't say. The next week, executives requested that all future reports go directly through Cassidy for technical verification. Trent's access to credit was being systematically cut off. Evan, Trent's friend who'd gotten my promotion, completely tanked a high-visibility client project. Missed deadlines, poor communication, budget overruns. The executives panicked. I was asked to support him mid-crisis to salvage the situation. I worked 70-hour weeks for 2 months, rebuilding relationships, restructuring timelines, and delivering results. The project was saved. At the final presentation, the client specifically thanked me by name. Cassidy turned this around completely. We were ready to cancel the contract. The executive who doubted my leadership material sat in that meeting watching carefully, watching me do what Trent's chosen protege couldn't, watching me lead without the title. That executive, Sasha, was the COO, and she had decision-making power Trent didn't know existed. His mistake in underestimating me was compounding daily. I started offering optional problem-solving sessions during lunch, just informal discussions about challenging projects or strategic decisions. I thought maybe 5 people would show up, 20 came the first week, 30 the next. It became the most attended non-mandatory event in the department. People were hungry for real guidance, not Trent's dismissive management style. I wasn't trying to undermine him, I was just filling a vacuum he'd created through incompetence. But the effect was undeniable. I was leading organically. People were following me voluntarily, the exact opposite of what Trent had claimed I couldn't do. HR noticed, executives noticed. Even Trent noticed, though he dismissed it as social hour when someone mentioned it to him. He didn't understand that leadership isn't always about formal authority. Sometimes it's about who people actually trust. I overheard Trent in the elevator one afternoon. He was on his phone, speaking loudly, clearly not realizing I was standing behind him. Cassidy, she's obsessed with being liked, not a real leader, too soft to make hard decisions. I stood there silently, listening to him mock me to whoever was on the other end. When the elevator stopped, I got off without saying a word. I didn't confront him, I didn't get angry. I just thought, good, let him think I'm soft, let him underestimate me completely. His arrogance was my advantage. While he dismissed me, I was building alliances, proving competence, and creating opportunities he didn't see coming. Soft people don't systematically dismantle someone's career, but I was learning how to do exactly that, quietly, patiently, with documentation and strategic precision. Sasha, the COO, invited me for coffee 2 weeks later. We met at a cafe downtown away from the office. You have real executive presence, Cassidy, natural leadership that can't be taught. She stirred her coffee thoughtfully. Have you ever considered applying for the strategic operations role? I knew that role, director level, 2 levels above my current position. I didn't realize it was open, I said carefully. Sasha smiled. It's not, yet, but it will be. And when it is, I want you to apply immediately. Don't wait for permission, don't second-guess yourself. I promised I would. That conversation changed everything. I had an executive champion, someone who saw my potential and had the power to act on it. Trent thought he'd ended my career. He'd actually just delayed it temporarily and made my eventual rise far more dramatic. Trent publicly berated a junior employee in front of the entire team the following month, screaming about a minor error in a report. The young woman was nearly in tears. I quietly stepped in, de-escalating the situation and addressing the error privately with her later. The next week, she resigned. Her exit email was sent directly to executive leadership with me CC'd. She praised my mentorship and explicitly called out Trent's bullying behavior. Cassidy is the leader this team deserves. Trent creates a hostile environment. HR launched a quiet investigation. 3 other employees came forward with similar stories. The power was shifting dramatically now. Trent's protection was eroding. His behavior was finally being documented officially. And I hadn't said a negative word about him to anyone. His own actions were destroying him. I'd just stopped covering for his mistakes. The director of strategic operations resigned suddenly. Office speculation ran wild about who would fill the role. Most assumed they'd hire externally. I applied quietly without telling anyone except Sasha. My application was comprehensive. 3 years of project documentation, letters of recommendation from 5 executives, detailed strategic proposals for department improvements. I'd been preparing this application for months, not knowing when the opportunity would come. When it did, I was ready. HR called me in for a discreet interview. 2 executives I didn't know well asked thoughtful questions about leadership philosophy and change management. At the end, one asked something that made me pause. Do you know why so many employees report feeling safer when you're leading meetings? I hadn't known they'd surveyed the team, but apparently they had, and the results were clear. HR called Trent in for a meeting a week later. I wasn't present, but Marcus told me what happened. Trent was being removed as team lead, temporarily reassigned to individual contributor status while they reevaluated the team structure. His face had apparently gone white. He'd asked HR directly if I'd filed a complaint. "Multiple people have raised concerns," they'd replied neutrally. "This isn't about one person." But later that day, Trent cornered me by the coffee machine. "Did you say something to them?" he demanded. I looked at him calmly. "I didn't have to, Trent. Your record spoke for itself." He started to respond, then stopped. He knew I was right. Years of poor performance, protected by relationships and favoritism, had finally caught up with him. The system had finally noticed what everyone else had known for years. My promotion was announced company-wide 3 days later. Cassidy Torres has been named Interim Director of Strategic Operations, effective immediately. The department exploded in cheers. Someone started clapping, and soon everyone was standing and applauding. One junior analyst actually yelled, "Finally!" loud enough for the entire floor to hear. I stood there somewhat overwhelmed, accepting congratulations from colleagues who'd watched me earn this for years. The underdog had officially risen. Not through office politics or connections, through consistent excellence and quiet leadership. Trent wasn't at his desk that day. He'd called in sick. I suspected he'd seen the announcement email and couldn't face coming in. His absence was telling. The person he'd dismissed as not leadership material was now his superior. That reality must have been crushing. The transition meeting was scheduled for the following week. Trent had to present his project updates to me, to report his progress, to answer my questions. I watched him walk into the conference room visibly uncomfortable. He couldn't make eye contact. I listened to his presentation quietly, professionally. Then I started asking sharp, specific questions about methodology and resource allocation. Questions I knew he couldn't answer because he'd never done the deep work. He fumbled, stammered, tried to deflect. "I can get back to you on that," he said multiple times. I just nodded, taking notes. "Please send detailed responses by Friday." The power dynamic had completely reversed. The person he'd told wasn't leadership material was now evaluating his competence. Publicly, professionally, mercilessly, without ever raising her voice or showing emotion. During my first month as director, I conducted a full department audit. What I discovered was damning. Trent had been making side deals for resources, showing favoritism in project assignments, and protecting incompetent employees who were friends. 2 of his protected hires were let go for performance issues he'd been ignoring. His budget was slashed by 30% for inefficient spending. Now he had to come to me for resource approvals. Every decision I made was documented and justified. Professional, strategic, defensible. But it systematically dismantled the empire he'd built through favoritism. Karma was hitting twice. His career was crumbling while mine was ascending. And I was doing it simply by implementing actual performance standards. The standards he should have been using all along. His mediocrity couldn't hide anymore. Trent's reputation collapsed quickly. Coworkers no longer looked to him for decisions. He was talked over in meetings. Projects routed around him entirely, going straight to other team members. I watched him fade into complete irrelevance. The worst punishment for someone who'd based their entire identity on authority and title. He still had a job. He still came to the office. But nobody cared what he thought anymore. Nobody asked his opinion. Nobody considered him important. I didn't have to actively destroy him. The natural consequences of competence-based evaluation did that automatically. When you remove favoritism and actually measure performance, mediocre leaders can't survive. Trent was learning that lesson in the most humiliating way possible, by watching someone he'd dismissed surpass him completely. I was offered the permanent director role without an external search. The executives wanted me specifically. My first major initiative was instituting a peer review leadership assessment program. No more promotions based on relationships. No more favoritism determining careers. Just documented performance and actual leadership capability. The program was approved unanimously.
Several employees thanked me privately for creating fairer systems. "This should have been implemented years ago," one said. I agreed, but I was grateful for the opportunity to make structural changes that would protect future employees. Changes that would have protected me if they'd existed earlier. Trent's era of accountable leadership was ending. Not just for him personally, for the entire culture he'd represented. That was the real victory. Systemic change, not just personal revenge. Trent stopped me in the hallway 3 months into my new role. His voice was quiet, almost defeated. "You always hated me, didn't you?" I looked at him carefully, considering my response. Then I said something completely honest. "No, Trent, you were never important enough to hate. You were just an obstacle I had to work around. Now I don't have to think about you at all." I walked away. He didn't follow, didn't respond. He just stood there processing what I'd said. The truth that he'd never mattered as much as he thought he had. That his power had been circumstantial and temporary, while mine was built on actual competence and would last as long as I continued delivering results. That was closure for me. Not anger, not hatred, just indifference. The ultimate dismissal. I'm speaking directly to you now, the person reading this who's been told they're not leadership material, who's been passed over for promotions they aren't, who's watching incompetent people advance through connections instead of competence. Listen carefully. You don't have to scream to get power. You just have to be undeniable. Build quietly. Document everything. Let people underestimate you while you're gathering evidence, building skills, and creating opportunities. And then make sure that the next time they look up, they're looking up at you. Excellence is the loudest statement you can make. Consistency is the most powerful strategy. Patience is the ultimate weapon. Don't get emotional, get strategic. Don't get angry, get promoted. That's how you win. Trent eventually transferred to a different division 6 months after my promotion. Lateral move, same level, but away from my department. Away from the daily reminder of how badly he'd miscalculated. I heard he told people he was pursuing new opportunities. Nobody believed him. Everyone knew he'd been managed out, made irrelevant, reduced to insignificance. I didn't celebrate his exit. I didn't think about him at all anymore. I was too busy building the department into something excellent, mentoring the next generation of leaders, creating systems that rewarded actual merit, living the life I'd built through strategic patience and undeniable competence. He told me I wasn't leadership material. Now he reports to my department. I didn't get revenge. I got promoted. And that, I learned, is always the better outcome. Always.